Hey everybody! Today we have Rapid coming on, and if you haven't seen the tweet, we will take a look at it real quick. And he says, "I'll never understand coaches who are like Champ, but have never played at a high level before. I can understand the argument about not having mechanics, but if you watch, all they will do is make dumb decisions." Or make the dumbest decisions, but they will say it's their mechs that are holding them back. And then a whole conversation kind of fell from that. I responded to that tweet kind of cheekily. I said, one, just at me next time with a little tongue out emoji, just kind of playful. Like, I'm used to this at this point. I've been coaching for almost 4 years now. And then I said, two, ranked is completely scuffed at the moment. Three, let's come on the podcast and have this conversation. And then number four, like, no one disputes that I suck at the game, including myself. So I guess let's just start off, like, what made you, like, tweet that? Like, was it some YouTube video? Was it you seeing me complaining about my teammates
No.
ranked for the 18th time? Or, like, what had your wheels turn into put that out there?
Well, I would say for like majority of like, I would really talk about like just like seeing on Metafy and seeing like a lot of coaches like in general in this game will be like I'll see a lot of their tweets who have either like no even RLCS experience or high level experience, but like they'll make these takes and I'll watch their videos that make not really any sense. Like it won't be like personalized. I feel like any coach, right, can like give you an answer of looking at the game and just seeing like certain things. But I feel like as like you need, I just don't feel like a champ or like someone who has had no high level experience should be coaching, like individual just gameplay, like decision making. I'm not talking about like motivation aspects
Yeah.
to higher level players like SSL. So that was really where it just kind of came from. I've seen it for years now, like just
Yeah.
like all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. So I think to a certain extent, I agree with that. I would even throw some Grand Champs and SSLs into that category.
Yeah, see,
There's a
I
lot
use
of
that. Yeah.
there's a lot of like YouTube videos that like because I'm always watching coaching content and like how people are thinking about the game. One, just I'm always open to seeing a new perspective, and somebody they may have one good point within their entire 10-minute video that's actually decent, even though the 95% of it's just like straight up wrong. Or
Mm-hmm.
it may do something to where it'll cause me to think and be like, okay, well, if that's how some people are thinking, maybe that can help me like understand what other players are struggling with if they're following this bad advice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, that's definitely something I've noticed for a while. And I've also noticed just like within my games, like the quality of games, even though I've hung around the same rank for quite a while now, like I'm seeing people have less and less, like even the bare basics, like understanding of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if that's
100%.
part of the them putting out these videos and it being like, here's something that I have yet to be punished for. It's the best way to play Rocket League. That's the way I view most of like the YouTube coaching content.
Mm-hmm.
And so, would you share that perspective, or would it be slightly different?
Like, I mean, I would say yes, majority of the time. I think like when there will be advice that I see on coaching that like you physically just can't think that way when you're playing. Like, and usually when I see lower level coaches, they're giving advice that like just will never work. Right? It's either like very surface level advice that doesn't like anyone could do where you're just like, oh well,
Just
have
rotate
better
back post.
yeah, or just like have better touches or just like but like and there'll be ways of thinking about things that like at a high level or even in general, like once you get to like because I'm not going to say talk really about you know, lower level coach. Because like when you're like around champ, even GC, it's a very different. I'm more or less talking about like when it gets up to like high level GC
Mhm.
or in the GCs to like SSL range, where talking about things in game that you physically just like will not be able to focus on. Like that it shouldn't be your focus in game.
Yeah. And I think also there's a distinction that I think you drew in one of your comments, like in the replies, was like there's a difference between coaching a team and coaching individual players to like get better in a solo queue environment. And like
Mhm.
those, I think those are two totally different worlds.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people don't understand. And like I think that's also like part of why I struggle like in ranked. Uh is like I'm very much like, okay, like this situation, this is like the clear answer. And so like I'm proactively doing it, and then teammate who doesn't know that this is the clear answer, bumps me
Hmm.
off the ball and is like, oh, and you know, lose
Yeah.
games because of it. And so there's the aspect of yes, what my teammate did was dumb and at the very least suboptimal, but there's also I've got to realize I'm in the solo queue environment and I can't be proactively doing things. I need to be more reactive because of the rank that I'm at.
Hmm. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So what would you say is like the big thing that you're seeing like at like the SSL level? Like who are these people that maybe not necessarily needing to name names, but like what is it that they're doing specifically that like made you go like this is so dumb, why are they saying this? Like
It's I mean, it's more or less like just how they're giving their advice. Like I know it to me it feels very scammy.
mhm.
I of course I know it's not scammy, but like but it feels that way because they've just never done it and they don't understand. So I'll hear somebody give advice to like, "Oh, think about this, right? Think about like do
Can you give
something
an
like
example?
this." Okay. So, in Rocket League, a lot of this game is subjective and very intuition based. Like there's patterns that you'll notice in the game, right? Every like that's one of the reasons why a lot of good players are good is because they have really good they've just done it a billion times.
Yeah.
So you just kind of understand and you feel certain ways in a game, especially as a high level player. Like like for example, if I'm playing ranked and I constantly keep playing ranked, like there's a feeling that I'm going to get if my teammates are constantly whiffing, even if I'm not even think about it, even if
Mhm.
I'm not going to think about it. Like it's going to be in the back of my head and I'm going to notice it and I'm going to play differently. And when you're not in that high level atmosphere, you can't notice those patterns. You can see what's going on in the game, but you don't have that feeling aspect. And I feel like having that and understanding that, like what that feeling is, especially at a high level, like not only just in SSL, but in pros, like being able to understand that there's a deeper meaning other than just surface level of the
Mhm.
why, right? Rather than just like, oh, well, this guy is right here, like hit it here. Like all that information is great. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that can still be helpful. But there's a different level when you're actually playing and experiencing it and understanding the why this even happened in the first place.
Yeah.
Like that is what I'm really saying is like understanding why this person even made the like thought of making this decision, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that because it could just be like you could understand that that decision is wrong, right? A coach would be like, well, why did you have this player right here? Like, why are you doing this, right? But the one thing that I feel like most coaches can't understand was the reasoning behind it, right? What
Mhm.
was that player feeling in that game? Like, what was he experiencing throughout that time in that game or throughout that day that made him feel that way? And I think it's even more apparent at even a higher level, like, even higher SSL to, pros.
Mhm.
I think it's even bigger in the pro scene than it would be even in like just basic SSL because I think there's a certain level like of, you know, like for example, I'm pretty sure everyone or most people in the Rocket League scene has been seeing like Kinsey's tweets. I don't know if you've seen them.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, Nothing bad about them at all, just very base level surface,
Yeah.
like which I'm sure that's the goal he's going for.
Yeah,
But
like good generic advice, not specified advice for, hey, in this very specific situation that you are facing in this moment.
yeah, and like how I've always coached and played the game throughout my career is like I've always understand that like if you play with the mindset of there's only one way, they're like the game is very subjective. Like I said in the moment, that's why the best players are the best players is because they're able to take advantage of moments that like if you're thinking very like narrow-headed where you're just looking at, this is what I need to do every single time, like which is how a
Mhm.
lot of coaches coach, like I need to do this every single time and
Mhm.
not understanding that like things may be, you know, untraditional,
Yeah,
but there's still benefits.
yeah. Like
So,
at the pro level, like if you just look at car movements and like structures and like if you broke it down to like assignments, like there's typically only like 5 different ways like teams play. Uh,
mhm,
And so, like, the thing that's annoyed me most about NA is they try to force everything through their lens of this is the North American way of playing. So, like, whenever they're watching Complexity play or they're watching K Corp play, like, they're missing that they have a different philosophy and, like, that they're actually doing those different things,
yeah,
especially like in the YouTube content space. It's very much like this guy's first man, this guy's second man, this guy's third man. It's like depending on the way you're thinking about the game, like second and third could be swapped in their minds and like what
mhm,
their responsibilities are. And
yeah,
so like having that type of shift for most people is struggling enough. But then when you get into like it's not just trying to out mechanic, like there's timings, there's like boosts, there's the space, there's influence that you can have on the pitch like elsewhere than like just on the ball.
mhm,
And coordinating all of these things is a totally different like perspective because it's no longer me going, okay, it's not like I'm coaching Calm to play with whatever Talk and Evo are doing.
yeah,
It's we as a team have decided this is how we want to handle situations. And like so whenever we're like trying to figure things out, we're like, okay, like does this fit within what we're trying to do? And it
mhm,
keeps us on the same page. And when we play like that, like yeah, granted it's only been scrim so far, but like we can keep pace with NRG, you know?
mhm,
Like I think we lost 2 games, then we won the next 4, and then like lost the last 2 games of the scrims. And again, like it's scrims, so everybody take that with a grain of salt. But like that's the current best team on this continent right now, and so most of the wins and losses came down to like either us not doing what we all had thought to do, or like agreed to do, or we're working on something, or like somebody made a mechanical mistake and they got a goal from it, which it's Rocket League. That's going to happen, you know?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in this era of Rocket League is um actually a lot easier than any other era of Rocket League. And even though it's more mechanical, especially with the
Mm-hmm.
teams and especially in NA, when I watch like all these teams play, like even SSG is literally the perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has overcomplicated this game. A lot of players are selfish. I'd say like honestly, if I'm giving an honest answer, I'd say probably 85 players, like percent of players are selfish, whether they even know it or not,
Mm-hmm.
whether they don't play for each other. A lot of them force solo plays they should have never even done to begin with. There's so much easier play. Like Team Evo is literally the perfect example of what I've been telling people for forever. Right? They don't have these
Oh yeah.
crazy. They have mechanics. They have mechanics, but they don't have. They literally have just as good as anybody's mechanics in 2020. They don't have Zen mechanics. They're not doing
Mm-hmm.
anything crazy. They literally just win like I've hated for so long. I've been told by people who don't understand the game, they're like, the meta is different. Like the meta will never change. What the meta is to me is people will get better. So you have to understand how to stop that, right? So when someone's getting in the air, you got to understand how to force. And forces never change. There's only so many things you can do with the ball. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how to force somebody off is really the only thing that will truly change. Like the game itself, right? People get better, decisions get more consistent, of course. But when I watch Rocket League, especially in NA, all I see is so many teams going for so many useless plays that have no benefit at all other than just trying to either score or do too much.
Oh yeah.
Like Evo is a perfect example of a team that all they win by good 50s, good forces, try to steal their boost, hit around. Like it's very simple Rocket League. It's very
Yeah.
simple. They don't complicate it at all. They got a top 4 from it.
Yeah.
And I think
Simple
that there's good
efficiency.
players. Exactly. It's consistent, efficient, simple. Right. And that's how always like Rocket League will always be like that. Simple Rocket League will always be more consistent because relatively you took players in another region that were not rated highly. These guys were not rated high. Like they're maybe getting 16th at like best, these guys,
Yeah.
like out of their prime by far. Like no one really has heard speed or relating wave in years,
Mhm.
and they come to NA and they're getting a top 4.
Yeah.
Like that should not be possible. But it's possible because the way people play in NA is so unrealistic and very selfish. And I've always had that opinion. I just think it's even worse now because I think that a lot of players don't really like the mental in NA has always been kind of like this not really care attitude.
Mhm.
And people are always trying to get that next opportunity for themselves. And a team like NRG, they have a good salary, they enjoy each other. Like they have nothing to lose from playing as a team. They don't need to prove anything.
Mhm.
They're in their game. They don't need to prove themselves. So they play such unselfish Rocket League. Like their team, why they're so consistent is that they're so good individually, but at the same time, they play so unselfishly. Like if you watch the difference between a team like Ultimates and a team like NRG, just their forces, just the way that they
Oh
go
yeah.
for their 50s. Like you'll literally watch LJ and First Killer. They'll just sit on the ground. No one will force like nearly as much like for a teammate. They would
Mhm.
rather someone else. Like why First Killer has always been like, hindered in his career is because he needs someone like a Lucian. He needs
Mhm.
someone who's going to sit there and do the work, by forcing, bumping, just not even trying to play for himself. But when he has a team of players who want to do the same thing as him, and take control over the ball and try to have a massive impact rather than, making his mindset just to play for his team, it shows why he can't get over that hump to where he probably should have been in his career and winning as much as he should have been.
Yeah, I
But
definitely would agree with that to a large extent. I think a lot of it just comes down to uh, the idea that, like, the best case, worst case scenario. I think like that idea of how to play the game, at least at the pro level, like, uh, like that died when the old NRG roster failed to make the stage in LA. Like
mhm,
that should have been the wake up call to be like, hey, like that philosophy no longer works. And you started to see like the more team play oriented. And then also like BDS the season before that when they were just dominating Europe when it was strictly online. It's like there's a reason that style of play and why Monkey Moon has won so many world championships and made so many finals is because of the way that he plays, and it's for his team. He doesn't overcomplicate things. He knows that his job is to get the ball here in this amount of time, recover, and be ready to do it again for a teammate until eventually the net's open.
mhm,
And like
exactly.
that's something that for some reason, like when I bring that up, like especially when I first started coaching, I was just like, hey, like let's just be efficient with boost and do these things and be on the same page. And like w- I was able to take like rank B teams and like make them competitive with rank X teams. Like not being completely blown out every game, like taking them to like best of sevens and whatever series we were in. I think it was, what was it, like what was that, like Melon Patch League or something like that, like way back in the day.
Mhm.
So like there were things that like I was just like, hey, like this is where Rocket League's going, and it's more team oriented. Like everybody's catching up to each other, and that was something that like I'm surprised like still has yet to catch on with the rest of teams, especially with like how poorly NA does outside of NRG in the G2 roster.
Yeah. In my opinion, like, because this has always been an issue. Like I've said for years that like back in 2020, 2021, teams were, of course, not as mechanical, but no one tried to be. You
Mhm.
know, it's like kind of like what you think of like, other sports like basketball, the OGs say like, like back then it was just like, don't even try something because it's like not efficient enough to even be wanting to go for it.
Mhm.
And like if you made one stupid challenge, like your team is getting on you for doing that. But now in this era, it's kind of like it's so easy to play. Like, I still play the game like every once in like a blue moon, and I play in these lobbies and I'm like, wow, this is so much easier than ever before because the threat of a counter is just gone because people don't read it correctly.
Yeah.
They're playing for themselves. They don't support their teammates. They're playing for themselves. So like you could do something so um, just so poor and not get instantly countered for it because the other team isn't even paying attention to it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I think the clearest
yeah.
example of that I see in twos a lot, like at every level, like even at the highest level. Granted, like at the highest level, like they're playing twos for mechanical practice more than they are to like really win the game. But
Mhm.
like they'll get a free ball and they'll be in a 1v1 or a 2v1 because they stopped the counter and like or they stop the attack or whatever, and they've gained possession, and the other guy hasn't had a chance to start recovering yet, and they'll be like, "Cool, let me like slow this down, buy the other team time to have their second man recover and get back or challenge me." And most of the time, like they just rotate back and leave their teammate in a 2v1 for 3 seconds. But because it's NA, the guy who has the ball won't even pick up the pace because he's just like, oh, let me try and solo play, out mechanic this guy. And he out
Mhm.
mechanics them, but he took so much time doing it that the other guy got back. Where if he had just played it fast, gotten a 50, made the bounce somewhat in the middle of the field for his teammate to be there for, the other guy's not getting back in time no matter like how poor that 50 goes, you know?
Yeah,
And
100%.
and I see that in twos a lot, and like that I think is like exemplifies like what's wrong with like North American Rocket League in general is that right there. It was like
Yeah,
they have to out mechanic somebody. It can't just be efficiently moving the ball into their net.
it could be so easy. It is so easy. Like the level of decisions that these people make nowadays, like, and it's more apparent even in higher level,
Mm-hmm.
it is very I can't, like when I watch these games, like I don't even understand what they could be thinking about because, like if you understand where your teammates are, the decisions are very apparent. And, in this game, how it's always been is like if you're good enough, your team will be good.
Mm-hmm.
If you're smart enough as players, your team will be good. It doesn't even matter about, the team chem. It's been like this in NA for years. There's yet to be a team that's filled with just like really good players. Like, and I don't mean really good as in like mechanical. I mean like actually players who understand the game. That's why in the top, we've yet to see a team from like a top four just make a roster change or switch and then just like completely drop off.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they can just switch teams because they have this understanding of the game that it doesn't matter how they play together. Yes, it's going to matter whether they win the tournament because once you get to a top four level, that's when it starts to matter. Like if you're in the top four level, like you're going to stay around there. It's going to like you and your team how you decide to like, you know, get on the same page is going to dictate whether you're either a fourth place team or can win the event. That's
Mhm.
really how it is, especially in NA. I'm not going to say about an EU, but it kind of seems that way, especially, the consistency out of those top guys now over there. But especially in NA, it's been like that forever, where you could really make any roster change you want to make, and it's not going to hurt you because the teams below are just such like bad teams at making team decisions,
Mhm.
and like for each other. And that will never change. I feel like it comes from, the lack of truly like having a place to build and being stable. Like RLRS and RLCS, the league, you really got to build those qualities in yourself, and there was a sense of security, and like you knew that like you could just build yourself. Like back when there was RLRS, you could go through RLRS. I was in there for 2 years and had to learn how to be consistent enough to win,
Mhm.
and then eventually make RLCS. And I think nowadays, a lot of bubble teams, there is no learning. They just get on a team together, scrim maybe once a day, don't watch replays. They go in there hoping to peak.
Yep.
They go in there hoping that they peak on the day. But even if they peak, they're not going to peak for a weekend. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because their decisions aren't good enough to last that long. So any team that's decent is going to have many opportunities to break them down so easily, just based on the crazy forces and dives they make, the dumb solo plays that they go for that like literally could have just been a hit around. All that kind of stuff contributes to the reason why these teams, even if they peak on a day where they're just playing great, they're going to go into the next day into top 16 and go out round one. Like that's just always what happens. And it's always been like that for literally the past 5 years. That has not changed one bit. And I don't know why people don't learn. I think it's mainly because like it's harder to become a smarter player than it is to just dive at something crazy and get scored on. And it's kind of like, oh well, you know?
If I had just executed my mechanic that I can execute 1% of the time, if I just made it that 1% every time, then I'd be the best player and my team would win. It's like that
Yeah.
feels like the mindset. And
No, 100% it is.
yeah, it's like that's I think probably like also the annoying part with coaching in general, because I think also like we need a language to like describe like how teams play other than like defensive and aggressive. And I think once we have that and like standardize it to some extent, to where like if we started talking about like football and I was just like, hey, yeah, like they're playing like a cover 2 defense, like
Hmm.
that's a common enough term. Yeah, there's teams that play it different ways. Like there's quarters coverage, there's all these different coverages, but there's a language associated with that. And Rocket League, I feel like it just hasn't gotten there yet.
No, for sure.
Do you think that once that like starts to be more widely used, or like we have that as a community, that these things are going to become more and more apparent to not only the players but the casual viewers, and being like, oh, like now I understand why like this is dumb, because they're going for this low percentage play and they could have done this instead.
See that, okay, what you just said is a perfect thing that I feel like people can't understand just being a viewer or not a high level player, is because they're not going to see the opportunity that was there that that player could have done.
Hmm.
I mean, they can of course see some of them, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that like only that player knows what he is capable of in that moment. Like
Hmm.
only that player knows, you know, how he could 50, how he could get like, set up that play in a good way. Now, could you see, oh, he went wrong. He could have just hit it like this, right? But that player being such, one in that position, two, you know, he can see differently. You know what I mean? You can't see it
Yeah.
until you're actually in his eyes. And in his eyes is what's going to be, what he's capable of. But when you're a high level player, there's things that you can do, like just mechanically, that majority of the people can't do. So if they can't do it, how can they necessarily see that it's a possibility? Like unless if you just see like, oh my God, this guy messed up his reset and he had an easy reset around.
Yeah.
I'm more or less talking about, let's say, guys in the corner, right?
Yeah.
And let's say he gets a neutral 50, but there was this decision there where he could have faked him, right?
Hmm.
Faked the ball, took it off the wall, but a casual viewer, even a casual viewer or even a high level viewer might not even know that that's there,
Yeah.
So that's what I'm kind of saying is I think right now in this state of the game, it's like at a high level, even with anything, I feel like there's a level of experience you need, just kind of like when, I like using the NBA as an example, or even boxing, or you hear professionals who've been in the sport, they always have a different perspective than the casual viewer. Or
Yeah.
like, because they've been there, they see the insides, they see what they're trying to build, right? Because a decision might not make sense, but it's for a certain reason, right? And that reason that viewer is never going to know unless you're actually there. So, and that's why I also said like earlier when we were talking about it, there's a difference when you played at a high level. And like, I even understand the difference because when I'm coaching, I can see the patterns, but I can't feel it, right? So when I've been able to step in and play these, bubble level teams and, top 32 teams, it's very apparent what's going wrong, even just clear as day,
Hmm.
what the issue is versus just being able to watch it. Because there's a difference being able to feel it than being able to see it. And I think as a player, that's why it's very important, especially with the team. You have to have your teams communicating, and talking about what's going on. And I think that's another thing is that most players there's some players who'll just sit there silently. Like I struggled with that in my career with, having teammates who'll just sit there and not say a word. So you have no idea what they're seeing, right? And you have to like figure it out yourself and see. You almost have some coaches have to like try to dissect someone's issues when, that player should already know what he sees, And yeah, I mean, going to that question you said is like, we're viewers and people be able to see it. I don't think they will. I don't think the casual players will, but I think that players um, should be able to communicate that to their coaches. But I do feel like that's a struggle with them to communicate with what they see, why they're doing it. The amount of times I've heard in my career, even coaching, uh, I thought this, right? It's always the wrong answer. Like I hate it so much when someone is like, yeah, I thought this was going to happen. I thought this was, why did you think that was going to happen? Like what
Hmm.
told you that? Like there was nothing in that play that told you this was going to happen. So why did you think that? And, um, and then there's no explanation for why. It's just, I thought it. And that's the like one of the core issues with the brain of most NA players is that they don't have that 1+1=2. It's just kind of like, I've been playing this game so long, I notice patterns how I notice them. I kind of have this fundamental way of which I play. Not very detailed. It's just kind of like,
Hmm.
I've gotten very good individually. I know how I like to play, but I don't know why I do things. There's no why. Even you would be surprised. I mean, you probably understand this, but you would probably be surprised how many players who can, make a top 8 who really have no clue or that high level of understanding of the game. They're just in really good environments and can
Hmm.
make some decent decisions. They don't actually really know the why. They're patterns, This game is about patterns. You notice these patterns and your brain just kind of tells you, I do this. I maybe don't know why I do this, but I just do this.
Yeah. And I think that's for people who don't know my background. So the easiest way to put how I got into coaching is essentially I had a bunch of free time because this thing called COVID happened. And so I went back and I basically like analyzed every like RLCS game I could find and like dissected these patterns of when people scored or when they had a chance to score, like, and basically built like the equivalent of the chess table base, which is if there's 7 pieces or less on the board, the table base has literally solved it out and can tell you exactly what to play for every scenario, and it is just 100% solved. And so I basically did my best to do that for
Hmm.
Rocket League. And then on top of that, I started working with Mizu, like when he first started streaming as an editor. And I use
Hmm.
that term very loosely. was literally throwing clips together and some like really basic stuff. But
hmm
I got to start to hear, okay, so this is how like in top 100 ones player, SSL player starts to think about the game. And I'm like, okay, like now some of these decisions make sense, some of them don't. And then I start to work with teams. I think my big break was getting a single game off a rank A team with 2 champs and a GC1 and a weekly.
hmm
And like that started to get me noticed. And so the next like 2 years, I'm just like, okay, here's like this, and getting feedback from the players to fill in what I was missing. So like the very things that you're talking about, like the first 2 years of coaching, I had all the analytics and numbers, and it's like this, but I still hadn't quite grasped that feeling that you're talking about, or like why somebody was doing that. And that took years of working with players at that level to get adequate enough that I could actually help players
That,
at that
that
level.
was what you just said right there is the biggest thing of what I was saying on Twitter, is that a lot of these players have zero high level experience, or coaches, sorry. They have no, like, you can't know the why unless you're hearing the why from somebody else.
Yes.
Like, you can't just watch a replay and look and be like, okay, yeah, he's doing this. You're not going to be able to find out the why unless you're actually talking and understanding how someone's brain, how multiple people's brains are working, right? That's
Yeah.
like, and why they're making those decisions, unless you're a player, right? Because if you're going to be a good coach, you need to have that experience. Like, I've had coaches in my past who, of course, weren't high level players themselves, but if they're in an environment like, even like you, with Evo, Calm, and Talk, you're going to have a lot of conversations and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and why, just the why. And if you don't have that why, I feel like trying to give others that why is very disingenuous, because you don't have that why yourself,
Yeah.
and that's what bothers me. It's not like, about the whole thing. That's what truly bothers me, because like, I'm like, I hear
At that
these
point,
guys.
all you're doing is quoting somebody else and pretending it's you.
Exactly, and it's super base level. That's why, like, of course, it's not scammy, but to me, it feels like a lot of these coaches, like, they probably think they know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them. But I promise you, I've had conversations with many of them, and I just kind of let them, say what they want to say. I never critique. I let them just kind of do what they do and say what they say. And then, when I've heard it for years, like even when I was a player, and I'm like, what is this guy even talking about? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. But, it's because he doesn't have that experience, whether, being around it for a very long time, because it takes a time to really understand why. Why is he doing this?
Yeah.
You can look at it, you can see he's doing it, or even why he made that wrong decision. What did he see? Why was he doing that? Right? Because he could have felt something or seen something, the reason why. It's very easy to just tell someone, well, I mean, Zen does this. Why aren't you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Zen understands what he's doing. He has a deeper understanding of the game, and he understands his why, right? You can't just tell someone, all right, do this every time because Zen does it, and think that that's going to help them. And, I think when coaches like give very base level, unpersonalized things as well, like, I kind of, don't like that as well, because I feel like there's no effort into that person. Like, anyone, you could literally search on Google and it will tell you that same thing, like, but yeah, that's what kind of bothers me about this whole scene and how people do things.
All right. Yeah. Express had a question. He says, I think there's a lack of communication here. If we diagnose the why and understand the reasons behind multiple whys, at what point does me being a low level player earn the respect to be viewed as a high level coach?
So that's a question?
Yeah.
So he's asking that question. Well, I would say you have to, like I said, it's the experience. Experience is the greatest teacher of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can be a successful coach without that experience. And no one, a lot of people aren't going to give you that leeway of having trust, no matter what. Like, you need to have that experience. A lot of people gain that experience, in IRL, like sports, such as, their assistant, right? Or they're around an environment of people who know, right? And they're around that environment for a very long time. It's physically incapable. Like you could put in a lot of work to start understanding things. I mean, I think you're a good example of it. You
Yeah.
know, coaching for a while, learning, understanding, gaining a better understanding. Got a really good opportunity to be an assistant coach with Nick
Yeah.
on for a high level team, and being able to get that experience will be able to help you. You know, you can't just come into an environment like I don't think you would have been as successful, or anyone in that matter, if let's just say you went from where you were without that M80, you know, being that assistant and getting that environment to just be able to see, to be able to bring it to where you are now.
Yeah.
You know, I think everyone needs that experience,
I think
regardless of who you
also,
are.
I think also there, we look at the M80 situation, but what people also like probably don't know is I was coaching a two champs and a GC1 for a year. You know, we had that one good game, and then I started to work with rank B players. And so it was a steady growth of understanding and working with players at different levels in like the competitive space, like from the women's scene to, you know, like rank B, B plus teams. Like I worked my way up, gained the understanding, took the understanding I got from all the hours I put in to understand this game at a tactical level, and then took the experience of the players and was just like, okay, now your decisions make sense. And then here's why your decisions don't make sense within like this tactical information. And so like I'm hitting it from both sides. And I think what most people look at is they just go, okay, like you can get experience and like work your way up, but you still need like top down helping you as well. And it's going to
Hmm.
be a while for you to build that up. And so I think that's where a lot of bubble players also struggle is they're getting advice from like other bubble players
Yes. Oh my gosh.
or like,
Yes.
and I also think like no offense to all the coaches that are just former pro players, like there's a skill set of coaching that I already had from teaching how to play guitar for like 7 years. And
Hmm.
you know, I'm almost
Those are
31.
qualities.
So
Yeah,
like
those are
my
very
actual
important
like,
qualities.
yes, there are players that had better information, but I could translate that information better. And so even if at the time my information wasn't as good, because I could translate that better, I could get a team working together better than you could. Not you specifically, Rapid, but
Yeah.
just this hypothetical person. And so, like, that's a skill set that also isn't there. And I think probably the biggest growth that I've had over the past 4 years is like in the mental game and understanding, like, not just like what pressure feels like, because I've lived life, I've been through real pressure. Uh,
Hmm.
to the point where it's just like, oh, like it's a top 8. Like, why are we stressed about this? Like, we're playing a video game. Like, so like to me, like it's not a big deal.
Hmm.
Uh, but to somebody who hasn't had my life experience, like I've learned like why my body reacts certain ways. Like when I'm feeling emotions, my body does certain things, and that's something that you know, especially when we're dealing with literal children, they don't have that experience, and that's something that you as a coach also have to help them develop.
100%. You said something really good, and you said you talked about getting advice from other bubble players, right?
Yeah.
It goes with pros, right?
Hmm.
And I'll say something that people don't really understand. When I people look at where you are equals where your knowledge, right? So when I was on Shopify placing top fours, I could have went to any bubble player, gave them the worst advice ever, and they would think I'm like the holy grail of
Hmm.
knowledge. I
Yeah.
could have said the most dumbest thing. I could have, if Energy wanted to, if they truly wanted to, they could go to every single bubble team or talk to these players and be like, yeah, this is how you need to win, completely telling them the wrong thing that's going to make them throw, and they're
Oh
going to
yeah.
believe it. They're
Yeah.
going to believe it. Like because I've even gotten the same level of treatment. Because like through my career, I've had a different, like very, very different career path from most. Like honestly, probably 99% of the player base. So when I came up in my career, I made a lot of enemies through a lot of pros because I would say that like I just didn't. It was like high school.
Mhm.
Like that's what I'll say. Everyone was young at the time.
Well, you
Everyone
guys were all
was
high schoolers, so of course
yeah.
it was like high school. Yeah.
Yeah. It was all
Who
it was
could have
just
guessed?
very
Yeah.
it was
Whoop, did my internet just go out? Hold on a sec.
like I was never gonna bow down to someone else for an opportunity. That's just not
Yeah.
my morals. It's not like I don't care.
Yeah.
I'll
Can
earn
you
it
repeat the
myself.
last 15 seconds? So my internet decided to be glitchy. So
Yeah, no worries about like which part. Like
so I think it like started to lag out right after I said high schoolers acting like high schoolers. Who could have guessed? Uh,
yeah.
so
Okay.
yeah,
So
just pick
yeah,
up from there.
like all right, sounds good. So like yeah, we were all young, it was very immature, when I played back then. And I I was never the person that was going to like lie or go against my morals just to get either a roster spot or um any opportunity in my career. So like or very, very early on in my career, I cut off all my connections because like I really didn't like, I mean, now looking back at it, we were kids,
Mhm.
and kids are, they say stupid things and it's a lot of drama for no reason. And so yeah, but me being like that age, I was not going to bow down to somebody or pretend to be their friend because a lot of people would treat you very poorly and then
Mhm.
you'd have to sit there and you'd have to be like, yeah, bro, you're so good, right? And I just was unwilling to do that. So throughout my career, I was able to like I had such a different mindset, right? Every teammate would have told you the same thing. I was known for building up my teams of people who no one rated. No one rated any of my teams good ever. No one. Like it didn't matter where I was at, whether it was an RLRS, whether I always surprised with the expectations because like even for beast mode, no one picked him up. Like nobody. He tried out with 3 teams, all of them said that he throws in tournaments and no one picked him up, right? Built him
Mhm.
up, talked to him, but it also comes in his character, right? So I made sure to pick up people with certain characteristics. Like I never picked up anyone who was in these friend groups, right? Because I already knew that there was a level of ego and level of I'm better than you without even proving it. It doesn't matter. So I never did that, right? And I think another good example is Parth, right? Because when Parth got picked up, you won't be able to find one good result or anything he did for why he would have gotten that opportunity with me in memory. There was nothing. Like you can't find it. He made a close qual, which was like 32th or
Mhm.
32nd and went last. You know what I mean? He wasn't high in the leaderboards. He wasn't high in six. He didn't do anything, right? But I would always see the qualities in players when I would play, right? And also when speaking to them, right? And so my route as a player was very different. So I had to take more of a deeper understanding. I didn't, which definitely hurt me at times because like I had to think while I'm playing and I thought a lot and I didn't get to just be a player. I had to think about so many things that, I wish I didn't have to do, but that was just the route that I took.
Mhm.
Right. And I think with players nowadays, um, there's no one who does that. There's no one, there's no players now who they all say they want to be smarter, but being smarter is harder and they don't like feeling uncomfortable.
It also
So
requires discipline.
it does a lot of discipline, because in the beginning, like I was not a smart player. I did not know anything about this game. Like when I came up, my teammates were first killer in atomic.
Mhm.
When I was coming up and I was known as the 15-year-old mechanical ones player. Like that's what I was when I came up. I didn't know anything, right? But I knew to be successful, I had to change.
Mhm.
And so I took the initiative, right, to be like, all right, I need to understand this game. Now, did it for a little bit kind of stunt like individually how good I could be? Yes, because I'm thinking about so many things that, as a player you probably shouldn't think about.
Mhm.
But what it also did was gain that level of knowledge and understanding what works, understanding how to be successful in this game. I've said it for years, And I'll tell you the only time that like I don't think any of these players truly care, like truly care about being better. Like
Mhm.
they all say that they want it. I hear it all the time, but they either low effort, not really grinders, don't ask questions. That's what I really um dislike about NA. That's probably I mean, there's other reasons for why I quit this game, but that's definitely a big one is that the meta changed in players to where
Mhm.
you couldn't have conversations anymore. It was show up to play, pray that you peak, and then go again. And then if you do bad, go to your friend group, talk about how much your teammates suck, switch rosters, repeat.
Yeah.
There's been players I've known, and you've probably seen who've been around for just as long as I've been around and haven't even eclipsed the 16th. You know,
Mhm.
like, and I think in coaching, right? I think a part of that comes to the lack of wanting to be disciplined, to wanting to learn. And I do think as well there's some people who get coaching from other bubble players, like you've said, and just horrible advice, like just horrible advice. They're just like, they'll say things that they're doing that they're not even winning doing, so it's like, why take advice from someone who doesn't really have that credentials or background or understanding,
Mhm.
you know but
Yeah, like I
you
say
know
this as a joke all the time when people question me. I'm like, "Where's your win over G2 last season?" It's like that's it's a little pretentious, and like I say it more as a joke, but like at the same time, like there is an element of truth to that. It's like like the tact. I was brought in for tactics for M80, and we were one
Mhm,
of two teams in NA that went toe to toe and actually took a series against them. And
mhm,
like, yes, like good players, and we had our mental struggles and our discipline fell out in top eight. That's definitely something that made me go, okay, I've really got to focus on mental this off season. So for next season, I'm prepared to help with that. Uh, but like the tactics level, like everyone was just like, M80 was like the best in Swiss, and that's partially because of like we were following the tactics that like I had set out. And so like when people are just like your tactics can't work, it's like you guys were all scared of us in Swiss last year. So like when I'm saying this is what somebody should do and this is why, it's like that is what I told them. I was like, this is what you should do. This is why it leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to this, which is going to set up these scenarios for us. And then once you're in these scenarios, it's the advantageous scenarios where it's how do you want to score because we're in a good spot, you know? Uh,
mhm.
and like when I tried explaining that to people, like they're just like, no, like Rocket League's so unpredictable. And
I
that I think also is like the biggest myth that I wish would die.
that burns my soul when I hear that. That like burns. Like it's so easily predicted. Like if it wasn't predictable, how was NRG that consistent? I
Yeah.
promise you, NRG is thinking the game is probably the easiest thing they've ever played. They get into every lobby. Some of the teams they probably feel like they can pre-jump because they're not threats.
Mm-hmm.
And um no, the game is very predictable. It always has been very predictable.
You're taking a
You
rectangle and hitting a sphere, and then that sphere goes in the direction that you hit it.
literally
Like
and
that, there's only so many things that can happen.
That's I was just about to say that
Yeah.
literally. Like there's only so many things that person can do with the ball, Like and there's only certain things that you need to be covered, Like
Mm-hmm.
that's all. Like if you're floating, right? And you're making that challenge and you're floating try to get him off the ball, right? And then what are you going to have? You're going to have someone who's getting ready to support under, right? To be able to guard that flow and get that like, past that next guy or you have a guy behind on backboard depending on where the ball is. You know what I mean? It's you as a player in the game, if it goes in your net, it goes in your net. But there's only certain things that you need to be watching to begin with. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that as a player, most players think that anything can happen. No, you know what I mean? Anything
Yeah.
cannot happen. And even if anything does happen, you have to understand what you should have been watching regardless of if it goes bad. Because
Yeah.
most players, like if you watch games, like a lot of these guys, like will be playing in a position that just makes zero sense because they already have a guy there. So
Mhm.
regardless of what happened with the ball, it doesn't even matter if the ball got pinch dunked on your side because that wasn't yours to play for to begin with.
No,
You
their
know?
teammate should have just got a perfect 50 to you. You know, like that.
Yeah.
That's the answer. Your teammate messed up the 50. That's what went wrong with that play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people
People are going to think I'm serious about that, but that's literally how like some people think. And
No, literally.
please understand that statement right there was sarcasm, but is exactly how a lot of
No,
bubble
a lot of
players
people
think.
think. They think like that. And I really hate that. Like I wish players would understand that like it's been a core flaw in the bubble scene. We have the worst bubble scene, like probably in really any esport when it comes to growing teams and players. Like there's individual players who can make it out, but individual teams are not able to anymore. It is very rare to see like SSG brute force themselves.
Yeah,
Like they brute force themselves in by grinding ridiculously and having very good mechanics. Like they brute force themselves in because of all three of them, just the amount they grind. Like I remember looking at their hours and all of them had like 120 grinding ridiculously in high level
yeah.
ranked lobbies. So
And
they
that'll get
definitely
you
are
one
lacking.
regional, but the thing
No,
is that's
exactly.
not sustainable.
Exactly. It's not. They're lacking one, the experience and IQ, which is why they go out not even making a top 16. They brute force themselves into where they have the individual talent if they are on their they don't have the consistency nor the ability to make the easy decisions. Now, if they are like Daniel and Beast, like that team's like having Daniel Beast One Atomic, but having zero IQ and literally just all the individual creativeness. They're
Yeah.
able to beat anyone, but at the same time, their individual consistency and how they could make the game so easy for themselves. With what they're capable of doing, the games could be some of the easiest games they've ever played. But since, they're not even they're thinking about, oh my God, how can I get my next shot? How can I score again? Right? How can I air dribble this out of my side and go for a double reset and then get dunked for no reason? It should be, oh, simple 50 hit around. Now they're going to be able to get great first touches off the wall to get, a nice solo play on net that doesn't even need to be scored. Just hit around and you can keep pressure. Like they have the individual consistency, like mechanically, where they should be so much better than they are. They should be able, like individually, if they have the IQ and understanding, be so much better.
Yeah,
But that's,
but NA
what's
doesn't
wrong.
focus on the macro at all. Like they don't think macro exists to a certain extent. Like the macro is I 50 it and I 50'd it to my teammate or not. And if I didn't 50 it to my teammate, it's either I messed up my 50 or my teammate was out of position. And like
Yep.
that's the only thought process uh, that pretty much happens like for a lot of these like bubble teams. Or it's, oh, I didn't get the flip reset, or he guessed it, my solo play right, and so he stopped me. So I need to be more creative on my solo play, which when you fall into that trap, that's what leads to really good mechanics, but really bad decision making. And so, like, that's the difference between being like a good player and being a good teammate. And
100%.
and I think that's where NA is so focused on, okay, can I peak, and then can I peak consistently to the point where people consider me mechie?
Yep. And then do I get a roster after that?
Yeah,
Do I look like a hard carry enough? But like this meta isn't hard carry.
yeah,
Like no one, like I don't understand how many times someone could do something wrong. It's literally like they keep doing the same test over and over and over and over again and keep writing down the same answer thinking that it's going to be right this time. It's like
well, the
that's
thing
the
is
best way to put it.
because they've peaked and because they have scored that way, they have that bias towards I just need to be better. Like like we said it jokingly, like, or I said it jokingly, like, yes, like if I could read ball bounces better, like I would be grand champ. And it's like that is technically true. Like if I could read everything a half second earlier and like actually hit it consistently, like yes, I would be better. But that's like the NA mentality of just like yeah, like I also need to understand that my teammates are going to do dumb things, and so I can't be as proactive as would like to be, because I'm not playing with people that trust and think the game in the same way I do, and so like
Mhm.
that's the like mentality shift that I wish NA would have, because one, it's kind of boring being like as a coach, like on a tactical level, it's just like, oh, I know what this team is going to do and what this player is going to do in 90% of the situations, and like have that answer. And then like they have no follow up because they're just like, oh, like they're stopping me mechanically. So that means I need to do a different mechanic. I need to, instead of flip reset, I need to fake. And like, it's like, no, it's just like you solo play so often that we know you're going to solo play. And so we
Yeah.
don't even have to aim for the ball. We just know you're going to solo play, and we're just going to demo you out of the air because you're that predictable, because that's all you do.
Yep. Like, before I have to go real soon, but the
Yeah.
last thing that I'll say, right, that it's so very basic. Like the basic way that I try to explain to people the issue, like when I tell you like a 3-year-old can understand it, is so how NA makes decisions is I put it think of a squiggly line, right? Like a line that constantly is like the decisions are someone who's playing aggressive, right? Their brain is that squiggly line always being aggressive, right? The squiggly line is just being aggressive, right? Permanently. Like your brain is thinking aggressively, right? And if you tell that player, and I'm talking about pro players, high level players, right? That, okay, that squiggly line, they having your brain being that aggressive at all times, not good. They go to a straight line to where now they're, ineffective. They're not really threatening anymore, and they're not going for the opportunities anymore. Right now, they're that
Mm-hmm.
straight line. They're ineffective. But what they need to learn is having that squiggly line and that straight line together. Being able to have that aggressive mindset, but not be aggressive every single play.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys just have straight aggression only. Like only. That's all they are to their game. They're very easy to read. When you're playing G2 or NRG now, like they're not just going to throw themselves out at every single play, but these bubble teams will dive at every single ball and you know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
You know it's coming from a mile away. And they do the same thing. They never fake chow. Like it's very rare that you'll see in threes, like high level teams, fake chow as much,
Yeah.
you know?
As a high level coach, I am aware of your habits. And even if they are quote unquote good habits, I'm going to exploit them because they are habits. Like,
Yeah.
look at the Super Bowl. Like, Fangio just completely had the read on Andy Reid. It's like they had habits, and Fangio was just like, cool. Here's us reading every single habit. Yes, their defensive line executed well.
Mhm.
Yes, their coverage executed well. But
I
it
hate to
was
cut
still
this
such
short,
a hard read. Yeah.
but I
no,
do
like
have
I
to cut
think,
scripts.
yeah. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. I think we got the point across. Like,
Yeah.
there is more to Rocket League than the micro out mechanic people. Like, there is a macro level to this game. Please stop acting like it doesn't exist.
100%. I agree with everything. I liked our talk today. I hope people who watch this can, maybe gain a new understanding of how the inner works, of how people think, and, what's wrong with a lot of the things that they, are seeing that maybe they didn't understand,
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, man,
enjoy some scrims.
I appreciate that, man. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah,
Loved
you
our
too.
conversation, man. All right. See you, man.
Peace. Well, thank you